everyone, and welcome to my LitLink project. My name is Jess, and today I will be sharing with you some comparisons between two different portrayals of the Greek gods in literature, namely in Homer's The Odyssey and Riordan's Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, as well as its follow-up saga, Heroes of Olympus. So without further ado, here is Homer vs. Riordan, how authors have portrayed the Greek gods in fiction. We are already familiar with Homer. We know he lived thousands of years ago and originally told his epic tales through spoken word before they were finally put down in writing. We also know particularly little about him as a person, as there have been many speculations about who he was, but knowing the time period in which he lived helps us understand the kind of portrayal he chose for the Odyssey. But more on that later. Some of you may be familiar with Riordan, especially those of you who grew up with the Scholastic book fairs, but if you don't know who he is, don't worry. Riordan is an author of books typically aimed for intermediate readers who was inspired by Greek mythology and created what is known as the Riordanverse, a literary universe in which teenagers born from the gods go on quests and become heroes. As a quick backstory, Riordan was an elementary school teacher before he was a writer, and he began his journey with the pen thanks to his son, Haley, whom he told bedtime stories to all about the Greek gods. Haley, who was at the time getting tested for ADHD and dyslexia, suggested his father publish the story of Percy Jackson, which Riordan came up with in a few days once he had run out of Greek myths to tell him. Through his writing, Riordan was looking to represent children with learning difficulties, giving them role models and heroes who had the same struggles as they did. There are over 2,600 years in between Homer's and Riordan's work, and that makes all the difference. For starters, Homer shared his epics with the people of ancient Greece, all of whom revered the Greek pantheon and built the deities' temples and shrines. In the modern world, paganism is not widely practiced, and the Greek gods are seen more as characters in fiction than real deities. This first comparison sets a tone for the kind of works we are presented and the way the gods play a role in them. When it comes to the portrayal of gods in Homer's and Riordan's work, despite them taking superficially different routes, they are fundamentally the same. Homer takes the passions of the gods to be determining factors of what happens on the human level, according to Wolfgang Kohlmann's article Gods and Men in the Iliad and the Odyssey. In other words, the passions of the gods are the motive behind everything that happens with mortals. With Riordan, though, it gets a little more complex. The Greek gods do not determine everything that goes on in the mortal world, but they do play a big role in defining what occurs in the demigod world. Ultimately, for both authors, the gods act as motivators that will drive their epic stories forward. Now let's take a look at a couple of deities shared between the Odyssey and the Riordanverse. This is Athena. This is also Athena. That's Athena too. And that's, also Athena, but she's in disguise here. She might seem inconsistent, but in truth, she represents wisdom regardless of her appearance. In the Odyssey, Athena's presence is prominent. She leaves Mount Olympus to help Telemachus in his search for his father, Odysseus, when she feels that she has witnessed enough of the young man's suffering. Athena disguises herself as a mortal man and soothes the worries of Telemachus, giving him clear advice and coming to his aid when Telemachus prays to her. Now, as for yourself, if you listen, I have some wise advice, she tells him directly once Telemachus presents all his troubles to her. In the Riordanverse, we don't see much of the goddess, and this is done on purpose to show the emotional turmoil of one of the recurring protagonists in the novels, Annabeth Chase, whom Athena is the mother of. When she does address her child directly, though, it's almost like she's doing it in riddles, challenging Annabeth to prove her worth as a daughter of wisdom, and even plainly denying the girl any help. However, both representations of the goddess of wisdom share one thing in common. Neither in the Odyssey nor in the Percy Jackson series do we ever get a description of their godly forms. When Athena presents herself to mortals, she does so in disguise or in what is referred to by Riordan as human form. Despite this, some mortals manage to recognize her, as Telemachus and Percy Jackson did, respectively. Now, we wouldn't have Athena without Zeus. Zeus is the father of the 12 Olympian gods, and he rules over Mount Olympus while controlling weather in the sky. In the Odyssey, Zeus argues that men bring their suffering upon themselves. He says, "It's disgraceful how humans blame the gods. They say their tribulations come from us, when they themselves, through their own foolishness, bring hardships which are not decreed by fate." In Homer's epic, the Olympians punish injustice directly, or, as Zeus might put it, divine injustice is brought down upon the men who purposefully do harm. Gods are prideful, and Zeus even more so, as he is the highest god, as said by Kohlmann, only going out of his way to help a mortal when and only if due offerings and sacrifices have been made. We see this in Riordan's work too, as Zeus is notoriously missing in action most of the time, no matter how often we are reminded throughout the novels of how powerful he is. The few times he lends a helping hand, he does so only to his own offspring, Thalia and Jason Grace. In the Riordan verse, Zeus is also prideful, to the point where thanking his own brothers appears to be a difficult task for him. Your uncle, Poseidon tells his son Percy with a sigh, referring to the god of thunder, has always had a flair for dramatic exits. I think he would have done well as the god of theater. When mentioned in conversation, especially in an unflattering way, thunder will rumble. Demigods avoid flying when their godly parents are in conflict with Zeus, as it is his domain. In the end, in both versions, Zeus is feared and widely respected. It is important to consider the kind of audience a piece of work is aimed at when analyzing it. The Odyssey is often taught to students in high school and college, and many people in their adult life pick up the book of their own free will. It is a kind of read that one might argue requires a bit of a greater reading comprehension skill, or maybe just an interest for the subject of Greek heroes and deities. The Riordan verse, on the other hand, is often marketed toward a younger audience and can be found at the children's section at bookstores. This sets the tone for the kind of behaviors that we will see in the stories. Homer talks about the gods as forces that drive the story forward by either assisting or hindering a hero's progress, actively interfering with mortal conflicts and even taking sides, as seen in the Iliad. In the Riordan verse, the gods are, for the most part, absent, but when they do show up, Riordan takes a more humorous and light-hearted approach, exaggerating their traits in order to make them a lot more accessible to the readers without them needing to be acquainted with the Greek pantheon beforehand. Brianna Martin points out in her research about Riordan's literature that throughout Riordan's novels, we do not see the gods interacting with their mortal offspring often, yet their powers are present within them, therefore making demigods a medium to represent the Greek gods. A child will have an easier time relating to another child than it will to a centuries-old deity, after all. Riordan shows that the greatest mythical figures are not immune to the changes that occur when an ancient culture is appropriated by the modern power, Martin adds, while Homer shared his epic poems to an audience that was readily familiar with the gods being mentioned. They were not being presented with a completely new culture, as is the case with Riordan's primarily young North American audience. Now that we know how Greek gods have been presented throughout time, maybe this can help you understand the gods and their motives a lot better. Next time you read the Odyssey and find yourself questioning the actions taken by the gods, remember you can look at them through a modern lens. What would Poseidon wear if he were to appear as an angry human to berate a contemporary mortal for killing a Cyclops? Or perhaps, if you ever find yourself engaging with Percy Jackson, think about how the divine interference in the saga might have been represented had it been written by Homer instead.